Man, I'm already getting choked up. No, I just want to say I was really touched by your comments. So I've never been in a treatment program, never been addicted to anything, but what you said about this choice that you had to make of continue on this path that you're going on, or buck up, right, and take this hard road. I think everyone can identify with that, and I certainly can, because I've made that decision over and over and over again in my life. And I think you'll see in the story, if I get to it, right? I think you'll see in the story that I'm going to share that is what my life is composed of, is repeatedly making that decision and choosing the higher route. Okay, got that out. So yes, like Hazel said, I'm a data scientist at Microsoft. And what does that mean exactly? So I work in the national security sector. I work on really hard, complex problems that the government or the military is facing, and we work with data to solve those problems. Is that
much better?
Much better. Okay. For me, that's a dream career. Working at like one of the top tech companies in the world. It's phenomenal that I'm there now. Because 4 years ago, I moved to Utah unemployed. I didn't have a job when I moved here. I had this fuzzy idea that I wanted to be a data scientist. And I thought this combination of former Navy SEAL with a master's in data science from UC Berkeley, I thought that would be attractive to employers. And I was wrong. That wasn't immediately attractive. And I found out that you have to go through this whole process called interviews and work with recruiters and do this whole song and dance, and I wasn't good at it. And so the fact that I'm in the position I'm in now is a testament to not giving up and kind of knowing what you want and figuring out what you want and then going for it. So Hazel asked me to talk tonight about mental toughness, kind of how you build that, and doing hard things for the sake of that they're hard. And as I thought about how I was going to kind of talk about that, this one concept kind of came up, which I was a little surprised about, to be honest. And it's this notion of clarity. And in my experience, what I've found is that people who have clarity about what they want and why they want it are going to figure out how to get there, right? They're going to succeed, however you define success. So I'll say that again. So people who have clarity about what they want and why they want it tend to succeed because they will figure out how to achieve their goal, right? How to gain success. And the story I'm going to share with you tonight is about an 18-year-old kid who achieves his lifelong dream, right? He achieves his dream, he has a successful career, and then he has a fall from grace. Picks himself back up, dusts himself off, starts running again, gets 30 yards down the field, thinking things are good, and then stumbles again. And spends 3 years in this wasteland trying to figure out who he is, what he's going to do with his life, and then rises from those ashes and is now a data scientist at Microsoft, right? So that's where the story ends tonight. But that's the cool thing about life, right? It keeps going. So, all right, mental toughness, Navy SEAL. It started when I was sixth grade, 12 years old. I saw this video. Buddy came over. He showed me this video. It was these commandos fast roping out of this helicopter. They run over to the building. They plant some bombs. And then they run over to the beach, they put some fins on, and they like swim off into the ocean, and in the background you see the building just blow up. I mean, talk about like an effective recruiting video. Like that was it. That was exactly what I wanted to do. I wanted to be a Navy SEAL. And so I carried that dream with me all the way through middle school, all the way into high school. And by the time I got to high school, it started to get serious, and I was like, you know what? I don't just want to be a Navy SEAL. I want to be a Navy SEAL officer, and I want to go to the Naval Academy, which if you know anything about the Naval Academy, any of the service academies, they're extremely difficult to get into, very selective. You have to have 4.0 GPA, you know, a letter in some kind of sport, have volunteer service, and of course you need a congressional recommendation. You have to have like a senator or a representative actually recommend you to go to the school. So really tough to get into, but I wanted to be a SEAL and I wanted to be an officer, and that was the way that it was going to go down. So I get to be a senior, and I didn't have the creds, right? I didn't have the street creds, and so like that option was kind of gone. All right, so spoiler alert: I don't go to the academy. I don't become a SEAL officer out of high school. At that point in my life, I was like, well, I have to do something, right? So maybe I won't become a SEAL officer. I'll still become a SEAL, right? Because I didn't have a 4.0 GPA, and I didn't have any varsity letters. I hadn't lettered in a single sport. And if you look back at that kid, 18 years old, and if you had to put your money on someone, you know, you look at the Mount Carmel graduating class of 1994, and you had to put your money on some people who were becoming Navy SEAL, you wouldn't have put it on Chris Sanchez. And I'll tell you why. You wouldn't have, because, like I said, I wasn't lettered in any kind of sport, right? I think I graduated with a 2.1 GPA, so barely above a 2.0, you know, with all C's. I didn't have any volunteer service. I didn't have a congressional recommendation. At junior year, I got fired from Costco, right? Who gets fired from Costco? I was a cart pusher person, right? Who gets fired from that? Well, I did. I didn't have a lot going for me, right? Quick story. 8th grade, I was the fastest runner in my school, in my entire middle school, by far. As long as it was over like 3 miles. Right? I was good at the long distance. If there's anything, you know, a mile or less, I just couldn't sprint. All right? You'd pass me up. Fastest though in long distance. 9th grade, I get in, and I'm actually able to keep up with the varsity team on their training runs. And everyone around me and myself thought, oh my gosh, I'm probably going to letter my sophomore year, right? Because I'm already doing this good, and I was fast. Which, lettering your sophomore year, that's actually fairly rare, right? That's not too common to see. In fact, Michael Jordan, greatest basketball player alive, didn't letter his sophomore year, right? He didn't make the varsity team until he was a junior. So that would have been a pretty cool distinction to letter in cross country as a sophomore. So cross country is in the winter. Spring rolls around. What everyone else did, and what I didn't do, was join the track team. And the track team, right, just is how you build your speed. And so people who are in cross country do cross country in the winter, and they do track and field in the spring. That's like a thing, right? I didn't know that was a thing, and I didn't want to have any part of it, because the thought of like running around this track where it's just the same thing, you know, the scenery doesn't change, just sounded really boring to me. So I didn't do it, and the next year, sophomore year, rolls around, and I didn't make the varsity team. I was a JV. And all my team that had done track and field were starting to catch up to me. So I wasn't like way in front of them anymore. Now they're starting to catch up. So that sophomore year, track and field rolls around, and I'm like, oh gosh, all right, I'm supposed to do this. I'm supposed to do this so I can get faster. And I showed up to some meets, and I showed up to some practices, but my heart just wasn't in it. Like, I really didn't want to do it. And so I half-assed it, And junior year rolls around, and I didn't let her again. So here I am, a junior, still not making the varsity team, and everyone that was behind me who did 2 seasons of track has now passed me up. So senior year, I didn't even show up. Didn't even show up. I think in my juvenile mind, I was thinking, you know what? In order to get, because I still had this idea that I was going to get in the Naval Academy, I was like, okay, so I'm not going to let her in cross country. I'll win state championship in wrestling. Now, if you know anything about state championships, and if you know anything about wrestling, then you know that in order to win state champions as a wrestler, you have to be on the wrestling team. Right? So sophomore year, I do a season of wrestling, and my buddy, who I was doing it with, blows his knee out in a pole vaulting accident in track and field. And so junior year, I don't even show up for the team. So you have, at 18 years old, you have this kid who didn't even do 4 years of cross country, did 1 year of wrestling, got fired at Costco, he's got a 2.1. That guy's going nowhere fast, right? But I did have one thing that most of my peer group didn't have. And that was I had crystal clarity on what I wanted to do when I grew up. All right? I was going to be a SEAL. And there was no, there wasn't like, oh, well, maybe I'll do this, or maybe, that was it. I knew exactly what I wanted. So going back to what I said earlier, someone who has clarity about what they want and why they want it is going to figure out a way to get it. And of course, I didn't appreciate that as an 18-year-old kid, but I was going to figure out how to do it. I already knew that I could run. I couldn't let her, obviously I couldn't make the varsity team, but I was fast enough to be a SEAL. I knew that. The other part of being a SEAL, though, is you have to be able to swim. Right? You have to be able to swim to be a SEAL. So I actually ended up enlisting in the Navy as a senior, and I had a report date to boot camp in September. So I graduated in May, and I was going to report to the Navy in September. And in that summer, I decided, you know what, I should probably jump in a pool and swim a mile just to see what my time is, right? Just to get an idea and then kind of work from there, kind of improve my time. Because I knew as a SEAL in training, I was going to have to swim 2 miles every week, open ocean, and eventually have to do a 5-mile swim. So I was like, let me just get in and do a mile, right? And just for a frame of reference, a decent swimmer can swim a mile in about 30 minutes. And if you're like really good, you're actually a competitive swimmer, you can do it in about 20. And I think the best in the world can do it around 15 or something like that. So I'm looking to be like, okay, maybe I'll do a mile in like 40 minutes just to start. So over the summer, I get on my bike, I ride down to Mount Carmel High School where I graduated. They had open pool hours. I jump in, and I'm like, okay, 1 mile. 1 mile is 36 laps, down and back, 25 yards each lap. And I jump in, and after 7 laps, I pull myself like a drowning cat, and I just flop onto the concrete after 7 laps. I was exhausted, right? I didn't even come, think about that. What is 7 is 1/5 of 36, right? So 1/5 of a mile is as far as I made it, and I was just dead. Now let's pull back out a little bit. You're looking at this kid laying on the concrete, this history of no track record to speak of. What do you think he's going to do? Do you think that kid's going to become a Navy SEAL? No, you don't think he is. And what do you think he's going to do? Do you think he's going to pick himself up and keep trying to finish the 36 laps? Do you think he's going to, try and the rest of the summer try and build up to a mile? Probably not. Given his track record, you don't think he's going to do that. But what you don't know in that kid's mind is that he's already committed to being a SEAL, right? And you can't see that from the outside. And so even though I only did 7 laps that day, in my mind, I had already built out a plan for the rest of the summer. I was going to come back, and the next time I was going to do 10 laps. And the next time I was going to do 15, and then 20, and then I was going to hit a mile. And sure enough, by the end of that summer, I was swimming 72 laps, which is 2 miles in the pool, because I knew Navy SEALs swim, and they swim 2 miles. So I had to do it. I didn't have a choice. 3 years later, at the age of 22, I pinned on the trident, right? I became a SEAL. Thank you. And I was able to do that because I had clarity. That's what I wanted to do. Why did I want to do it? It was a little juvenile, at the time. It wasn't because of, it was the love of country or something like that. That just seemed like the coolest job ever, right? Jump out of airplanes, crawl around with a knife in your mouth, do diving under ships, blow things up, shoot, like that sounded fun. That's why I wanted to do it. And people ask me, when I give talks on it, whatever, they ask me, oh man, how'd you get through that? And, well, I got through it just the way I told you, right? That's what I wanted to do, and I figured out a way to make it happen. But the cheeky answer is, that I sometimes give, is that, well, you look, when I started training, I was 21. You can do anything when you're 21, right? Like I was in the peak physical condition. My recovery time was in nanoseconds, right? Instead of days right now. Like I work out yesterday, I'm like sore for a week, Back then I was able to wake up at 4 in the morning, do 3 workouts in the day, stay up late at night and do it again, 5 days in a row. So that's how I was able to make it through, is because I was 21. The other thing about being 21 is I had a lot to prove, right? I had a lot to prove to myself and to the world. So I thought. And so going back to mental toughness, going through that training, there are some lessons that I did learn, right? What I guess I would call them hacks, so like mental toughness hacks. And I know this is something you guys probably talk about, so let me reinforce it through some of the things that I learned in training, which is you obviously have to have that goal, right? Hanging out there, right? The goal being, become a Navy SEAL, finish training. But you can't focus on that day to day. You have to break that down into chunks. And what I learned in training was that the guys that were looking at finishing like first phase or looking at finishing next week were the guys who didn't make it, as opposed to the guys who were looking, let me just finish today, right? And in some cases, when it got really tough, it was about going from evolution to evolution. The first day that we had to do, we did the obstacle course. So the obstacle course was on base, so I didn't have access to it. When I showed up to SEAL training, I was able to do all of the swimming and the running and the push-ups and the pull-ups and stuff, all the way to the third phase standards. I showed up already able to pass the exit exam, right? I didn't want to kind of work my way into it. I wanted to show up ready to go. The obstacle course, though, because it was on base, I didn't have access to it, so it wasn't something I could practice. I remember the first day that the instructors lined us up and they're like, all right, we're going to do the practice run through the O course. And by the time we were done, at the end of training, we could do the O course in around anywhere between 6 to 7 minutes. First time I got on it, though, it was a kick in the balls. And I think it took me like 18 minutes. So triple the time from when I was able to do it my fastest. And this is at the end of the day, so we'd already been, doing our thing, pushing boats over our heads, moving logs. And so this is like the last thing that we had to do. And we make it through, and I'm like, oh man, that sucked. Like, I don't look forward to doing this next week, because it's really not going to be fun. I just can't wait to get back home and, get some food and go to bed. And the instructors were like, okay, good job on the practice run. All right, now we're going to do it for real. And I was like, no way. Like, they're not being serious right now. Oh, and of course they were being serious. And that's what I learned right then and there. You can't look. I couldn't look to the end of the day. I had to look at just finishing that particular evolution, right? So there's what I would call, I guess, a mental hack for mental toughness. Okay, so we're going to fast forward now. 14 years. So now we're in Afghanistan, 2012. I was in charge of an unconventional warfare team, and which is, what does that mean? So that means that we worked with foreign, how am I going to say this? So we worked with other units to counter insurgencies. So as you guys know, at the time there was Taliban was an active insurgency within Afghanistan, and so we were building up forces to counter that. I got sent to a remote location. My team got sent elsewhere, and so I was kind of by myself with just this other little army unit on this base. And Afghanistan is it's hard to convey in words, right? What the situation was like over there. Very chaotic, very messy, really hard to kind of find a sense of purpose over there, especially because guys were losing their lives, guys are losing their limbs, and trying to make sense of it all. By the way, I will say, right, so those of you who know, the Taliban has since taken over the country, and that has affected me personally because I gave, 9 months of my life over in that country, trying to make things better. And I talk to my kids about that, and because they want to know my thoughts on it, and I tell them, hey, we gave the Afghans everything that we could. We gave them supplies, we gave them money, we gave them weapons, we gave them our time, we gave them our energy. Some of us gave life and limb. And I'm one of the fortunate ones who made it out. We gave them everything we could, except we couldn't give them what they really needed, which was the will to fight. That was something they had to find on their own, through their own political process that they used, through their own consensus, and ultimately they never developed that. So it's tragic what happened over there. It's tragic that we spent so much, and this was the final outcome. And there's no other, I don't think there's any other way of phrasing that. It's just tragic. So there is a story to this, though. One of the operations that we conducted over there, I don't remember the exact purpose of the mission, but we were looking for Taliban. And so that place was just littered with IEDs, right? I mean, IEDs were going off everywhere. And so we figured, you know what, let's go a roundabout way, a way that they wouldn't expect. So we're going to go to the back door, and the back door there was this river, and they're not going to think that we're going to come that way, because why would, it's hard to cross the river. And there's not going to be any IEDs there, so we know that's a probably good route. So we do, as far as I know, we do one of the only river crossings in Afghanistan. We went there at night. One of the guys swam across the river, set up a pulley on the other side with this tree. We had this rubber boat. We all got in, and guys just ferried across, pulling this pulley. And that took, it sounds fairly simple, that took probably 2 hours to actually get everyone across. Because we're talking like 60 people, one boat, doing this pulley thing. So we get in there and we spend the rest of the night maneuvering into this village area, and we finally, at dawn, we get to the compound that we want to set up in. We assault the compound. I say assault. I use that word lightly because it wasn't like it was a defended compound. It was just somebody's house. We get there, set up all our positions, and later in the day, we sent one of our units out to do some reconnaissance, and the sky erupts with mortar fire, rocket fire. Instantly, everyone jumped on their guns. We started returning fire to divert attention away from our unit that was out. They were able to make it back in. They got mortared towards the end. Fortunately, all of them made it back in one piece. They got their bell rung, but they made it back in. And then it ensued the largest firefight that I've ever been in. 15 minutes straight of just the loudest rock and roll fest that you can imagine. And I think it only ended because the Taliban ran out of ammunition. They just didn't have anything more to shoot. And we couldn't drop close air support bombs on them because they were too close to the civilian structures. So rules of engagement, obviously, you couldn't target civilian structures, and they knew that, and they were using them. So huge, massive gunfight. Later that day, as we maneuvered out, I was actually going back to base, riding back in this big truck. I remember stepping out of the truck when I got back to base, and kind of doing this because my head felt stuffy. I felt like I'd been in a rock concert, right? Didn't think too much of it, went to bed, woke up the next morning, and my head still felt like it was ringing, and I couldn't really hear out of my left side. And I was just like, it's just exposure to noise, whatever. 3 days later, I still couldn't hear. I'm like, this might be a problem. So I went to the doctor, got diagnosed. He's like, you got an ear infection. Let me put you on some antibiotics. It wasn't an ear infection. It wasn't until I came back home, months later, I got diagnosed that I'd actually damaged one of the nerves in my ear. So I have permanent hearing loss in my left ear. Okay, there's a point to this story, though. I'm telling you this for a reason. My next assignment after Afghanistan was to be a platoon commander. And if you know anything about the SEAL team hierarchy, you'll know that the platoon commander is like the choice assignment. Like that's what everyone wants to be, because it's the first time as a SEAL officer you're in charge of the unit. You're responsible for everything that happens, in that unit, good, bad, or ugly. You're responsible for it. And yes, there's a few assignments after that where you get to be in charge again, but they're few and far between. And so this one's kind of just, it's a real coveted assignment. And the higher-ups look at that assignment and your performance in it, and they look at that for follow-on promotions. So you got to do well there. So I was really amped and excited to use all the kind of the tactics and all the stuff that I'd learned from Afghanistan into this platoon commander position. And I get there and I meet my boss, and it's just one of those things, we didn't hit it off, right? And nothing wrong with him at all, right? He wasn't incompetent. He was good at his job, but he's just the kind of guy that I just wouldn't want to hang out with, after work. And I was probably the guy that he wouldn't want to hang out with after work. So, little bit of a rift there. We go out and we do some training, and on this one training evolution, we're out on some ships, and without getting into the details, it was a training exercise, and I missed one of the safety points. Guys were coming over the ship, climbing the ladder. I ended up getting it on later. No one got hurt. No, it wasn't a big deal at all. But my boss found out, right, that I had missed this one safety check. And looking back on it, it was a judgment call. It could have gone either way. And what would I have done differently if I were in that situation again? I don't know if I necessarily would have changed my actions. But as an officer, you take responsibility for what you did. So I owned it. I missed it. Plain and simple. I missed that check. And I was the guy that was supposed to do it. So in his eyes, that was like strike one. Okay, this guy, little unsafe. one of our next evolutions, we get to this point where technology has gotten better. So now as a ground force commander, as a platoon commander, we start using these things called dual headsets. So dual headsets gives you the technology where you can hear the planes, communicating with the planes in one ear, and then you can hear your inter-squad comms in the right ear. And when you want to talk to one, you toggle the switch. When you talk to the other, you toggle it the other way. But it gives you the ability to run a stack at the same time that you can communicate with your squad. So of course, that's why I told you about the hearing loss part. I get to that part of our training, and I'm like, oh crap, I can't hear the planes. I can't hear the communications. I can hear tones, I can hear that there's sound, but I can't make out speech. So I went home that night, and I was like, crap, what do I do? Right? And so in our community, if you have a problem, right, especially if it's medically in nature, you hide that crap, right? you don't let anyone know. You bury it, and you move forward. But this was different, right? Because I was in charge now, and if I went overseas and somebody got hurt because I couldn't hear the planes, like I would never be able to live with myself. And so, and plus, getting overseas and then someone finding out, oh, you had this hearing loss thing and you didn't tell anybody? Like, dude, you're out of here. So I did what I felt was the right thing, and I went and I talked to my boss the next day, and I sat him down, and I was like, hey, here's the situation. I had this happen in Afghanistan, can't hear out of my left ear. I can't remember exactly what I said, but I said something along the lines of, I'm not sure if I can continue being a platoon commander. And I didn't say that to express any kind of like weakness in myself. If there was a way to work it out where I could continue, I would have done it. He took that as a sign of like me wanting to punch out. And so he said, hey, you need to protect your hearing. You've got kids at home. He said, let's work out something where you can, leave the platoon. And I was like, no, that's not why I told you this. I wanted you to be aware of this. And I was like, the only way I'm leaving this platoon is if you fire me. I was like, there's no other way. So he fired me. Yeah. So I was let go. And when I found that out, my initial reaction was actually one of relief. And I was like, like the weight was taken from my shoulders because I didn't have to work with this guy anymore. Huge sense of relief. I really just didn't like working with him. And that sense of relief lasted for like a week. And for the next 2 years, I was just depressed, right? Because my whole identity was centered around being a badass Navy SEAL. And not just that, but like a SEAL officer, a guy who takes charge, leads from the front, takes responsibility. And that identity had been stripped away. So as you can imagine, it was 2 years of hell, right? And that's where, talking about your comments, somewhere along the line, I realized, I was like, okay, let me tell you this one quick story. I remember walking out of our base building and seeing the gardener walk by with his bag full of cut grass. And I remember feeling envy. Imagine that, right? I was envious of this guy because he was doing his job. Like he was being a gardener, right? And that was easy, right? There was no one like criticizing him for the way he was working. It was something that he could do, and he was fulfilling it. And I remember feeling envy, like, man, I wish I could find a job like that where I could just do it and it's easy. And as soon as I would have a thought like that, the next thought would come in and be like, yeah, but if you ever actually did that, you'd be miserable. And so I had to make that choice of, do I continue on this path of woe is me and my life sucks, or do I get back up on that horse and be the person that I want to be. Maybe it's not, and clearly it's not going to be as a platoon commander anymore, but let's go for something else. And so fortunately, my boss on my next assignment was amazing. And he would give me a little bit of responsibility, see how I'd handle it, and then he'd give me more, and kept doing that. And about midway through that assignment, I remember him pulling me aside, and he told me, he's like, hey, I heard about the situation you had with Jason, the guy who ended up letting me go. And he's like, hey, I wasn't there, I don't know what happened. He's like, but if it was me, I would have kept you on. He's like, because you're doing phenomenal here. Like that encouragement, man, I really needed that. And that allowed me to put my head up, and I ended up promoting out of that assignment and taking on a really hard job under my next assignment. So I'm back up on, I'm not going to say easy street, but I'm back up on the glide slope. I'm doing well. I moved to Utah, so I retired from the Navy. I've got this master's in data science. The world is my oyster. And for several different reasons, just life being what it is, I didn't become a data scientist right away. I fell back into something that I was comfortable with, operations. As an operations director at this company, made it 7 months, and I got fired. I got literally fired, terminated, we don't want you to work here anymore. And so picture, I'm on this, back up on this, this nice trajectory, and boom, all those feelings of inadequacy come back, right? I started second guessing myself. I'm like, man, maybe people are right. Maybe I really do suck, that's a strong possibility, given that I got fired as a platoon commander, I got fired in this operations position. Fortunately, I had a mortgage to pay and mouths to feed, so I couldn't wallow and spend 5 years, figuring myself out. I had to figure out something. I spent the next 3 years, though, in a really weird situation for me, which was I no longer had clarity. So I went from having crystal clear clarity ever since I was in 6th grade to now I'm 43, 42, and I don't know what I want to be when I grow up. And on top of that, I had all these doubts of I don't know if you really can make it in the commercial world. I don't know if you can really succeed in those types of roles. The story that I'm sharing with you guys tonight is, if you don't have clarity, then fight for it. Fight hard for it. And that's exactly what I did. I didn't fully realize I was doing it, but as I look back now, those 3 years, which I term the wasteland, because I didn't feel like I was really going anywhere. I was talking to people. I was trying different things out. I went into sales. I went for chief of staff roles. I went for product management. I tried so many different things. I hired a career coach to help me get a job, to help me figure myself out. And it wasn't until June of last year that I just said, F it, I started out trying to be a data scientist. That's probably what I should go be doing. Because guess what? On all your downtime, something I noticed, you're always trying to learn deep learning models, and you're always trying to pull data. Maybe you should actually try and do that as a career. And I ended up resigning from my job, just left. Went into a data science boot camp, was coding for 40 hours a week, and in February I got picked up by Microsoft, right? Just phenomenal story. But the point is that bookend of having complete clarity and then not having any clarity at all and fighting for it. I want to wrap things up by just saying, I think life is hard. I think I think my life is hard. But I also think that that's kind of like saying, hey, I live on planet Earth, right? Because I think if you look at the subset of people who live on planet Earth, and then you look at the subset of people who have a hard life, and in statistics we call it an intersection. When you put those two together, massive, massive overlap. So, right, everyone's life is hard. It's designed to be that way. If you think about it, life is not designed for you to exist easily. Like there's disease and entropy and gravity, right? All these like all these things are designed to injure you or kill you, right? I think the choice really is which type of hard do you want to live? Because it's hard either way. And I think what I have chosen in my life is to consistently choose that hard that's empowering. I've been married for 21 years. That's really tough. Especially in a military career where you're in and out constantly, never able to really set a rhythm. My wife and I have lived in the same house now for 4 years, ever since 2017, ever since I got out of the service. I actually sleep in the same bed as her. And I couldn't say that for the first 20 years of my career. We've had our differences over the years, and we've had 5 kids within that. There's several opportunities for her to have left me or for me to have left and leave. But divorce is hard, right? Custody battles and all that bull crap, that's really tough. So it's either that or stay married. And not just stay married and grin and bear it, but stay married and actually try and build an empowering relationship with that person. That's what I was interested in, right? So they're both tough. Which tough do you want to have in your life? I choose the empowering one, right? I choose the one where I'm going to be empowered. So I hope that message resonates. Thank you.